They told us to fall in love with faces, not minds. They sold us fantasies, the dumb blonde, the humble country boy, the charming man who didn't know better. But behind the smiles, the studios were hiding a truth so strange it reads like a conspiracy. Many of Hollywood's most famous airheads and everymen were quietly brilliant. Inventors, strategists, polyglots, business geniuses, and the people who built the star system spent decades burying that fact because brains apparently ruin box office math. Over the next 9 minutes, you're going to meet 9 Golden Age stars who were shockingly smart and learn how studio machinery turned genius into gossip. These aren't tiny bragging points. These are real lives with patents, military medals, business empires, and linguistic feats that the public was never meant to know. Each story flips the headline you think you remember. Ready? Let's start with the woman whose invention quietly powers the wireless world you live in. Hedy Lamarr, the inventor who became the invisible backbone of modern wireless UV, probably seen the photos. A glamorous face, glassy eyes, hair that makes every men's magazine cover. That image nearly erased the fact that Hedy Lamarr was also an inventor. Born Hedwig Kiesler in Vienna, Lamarr's curiosities weren't limited to fashion or film. During World War II, she teamed with composer George Antheil to tackle a military problem that sounds like a line out of science fiction: how to prevent radio-guided torpedoes from being jammed. Their solution, frequency hopping, was elegant. Make a transmission jump rapidly between many frequencies so a jammer couldn't lock onto it. It was decades ahead of practical implementation. The U.S. Navy politely dismissed the idea at the time. The patent collected dust. Decades later, engineers realized the concept's enormous implications. Frequency hopping principles are built into technologies we use every day: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and secure military communications. For a woman who was publicly marketed as a pretty cipher, that is a subversive legacy and a reminder of what gets lost when a complex mind is reduced to a gossip column. James Stewart, the shucks everyman who commanded bombing missions. Jimmy Stewart's on-screen persona is the comfortable American next-door neighbor, humble, stammering, endlessly likable. But Stewart was also a Princeton-educated man with a deep knowledge of architecture and technical systems, and he took a real-life turn straight out of a different kind of epic, active combat leadership during World War II. Stewart insisted on flying real missions. He wasn't flown around for pictures. He planned and led bombing operations, flew dangerous sorties in B-24s, earned the Distinguished Flying Cross and other honors, and eventually was promoted to brigadier general in the Air Force Reserve. His stammer, so present in films, largely disappears when he talks about aircraft or aeronautics, a person who could adopt a persona when it served him. For Stewart, playing the humble man was a conscious choice, a bridge to audiences who wanted an ordinary hero. But it also masked a sharper, more technical mind, someone who could review set blueprints and call structural problems before they happened, and who chose to serve on the most dangerous front lines when he could have done less. Marlon Brando, the troubled genius who staged his own unpredictability. Marlon Brando's legend is all extremes. Breathtakingly brilliant one day, infuriatingly difficult the next. It turns out some of that reputation was performance. Brando often cultivated an aura of volatile genius because it gave him power at the bargaining table and on set. Beneath the myth, he had near photographic memory, extraordinary linguistic aptitude, and a deep technical knowledge of filmmaking. Lenses, lighting, and camera movement were not just jargon to him, but tools he understood intuitively. Brando also used strategy in his career the way a grandmaster uses openings. He researched studio finances, budgets, and executive vulnerabilities. Then he negotiated in ways that made him seem erratic while actually hurting others to a precise result. That famous image of the unruly method actor concealed a calculating mind, one able to read the room, the contract, and the balance sheet, and exploit all three. Angela Lansbury, the warm on-screen grandmother who quietly controlled Empire's Jessica Fletcher's warm smile, masked a fiercely strategic businessperson. Angela Lansbury wasn't merely talented, she was a dealmaker who understood ownership, international rights, and the long-term value of creative property long before it was trendy, rather than accepting the short-term, per-episode mentality that trapped many actresses. Lansbury negotiated production credit and profit participation. She made ownership the backbone of her career. That business savvy created generational wealth and gave her leverage. And it's the reason a show like Murder, She Wrote continued to earn decades after its first broadcast. Lansbury's public modesty was part of the strategy. Appearing unthreatening made it harder for executives to treat her as a bargaining adversary. The result? A performer who concealed a sharp economic mind beneath a comforting public persona. Claudette Colbert, the woman who weaponized vanity into control Colbert's demand to be shot only from her left side, could be dismissed as diva behavior, unless you see the angles she actually exploited. By insisting on how she would be filmed, she controlled lighting, camera placement, and set priorities. That small, seemingly superficial request turned into leverage she used to exact creative control, better contracts, higher pay, and improved working conditions. Colbert also had a legal mind. She read contracts carefully and rejected clauses that would have tied her down. When studios hit unfavorable terms in small print, she found them and forced renegotiations. Her mastery of language and legal detail, combined with an understanding of scarcity and market leverage, let her restructure how she worked. What looked like fussiness was often strategic theater, misdirection that left executives focused on a small demand while she quietly rewrote the rules. Basil Rathbone, Sherlock Holmes. But smarter than his scripts, when Rathbone donned the deerstalker, audiences believed they were watching expert acting. But Rathbone's intelligence went far beyond performance. He carried an extraordinary memory, linguistic ability, and, crucially, a real-life history in military intelligence. During World War I, he performed reconnaissance and intelligence work that required observational rigor and multilingual fluency. Rathbone's onstage powers of deduction weren't just mimicry. They were an extension of real analytic skill. He could pick up historical inaccuracies in scripts and correct them, and he had a physical discipline, swordsmanship, and precise stagecraft that made him a formidable performer and a remarkably capable intelligence officer. The man who played Holmes brought real detective instincts to the role. Katharine Hepburn. The strategic grandmaster who refused to be boxed in Katharine Hepburn is a study in long-term strategy and intellectual independence. Labeled box office poison once, Hepburn responded not by pleading, but by thinking. She purchased the rights to the Philadelphia story, turned the play into a Broadway hit, and then insisted on starring in the film adaptation. That maneuver was more chess than chance. She created leverage where none existed and used it to rewrite her position in Hollywood. Beyond career moves, Hepburn's upbringing and education informed a mind that could analyze scripts, identify structural weaknesses, and understand the economic levers of show business. She built financial independence through careful investment and a frugal lifestyle that gave her political and artistic freedom during fraught periods like the McCarthy era. What looked like stubbornness often masked a kind of strategic sovereignty. Peter Ustinov, the multilingual polymath, who made art his doorway to ideas. Peter Ustinov's resume reads like the biography of a Renaissance man. Actor, writer, director, novelist, composer, and public intellectual. Fluent in several languages, Ustinov moved easily between nations and cultures, writing and speaking with depth in each tongue. He used that facility not as a party trick, but as a way to address complex issues on the international stage and to shape public discourse. Ustinov also composed, directed operas, and ran cultural institutions. His intellectual life wasn't a hobby, it was the framework through which he understood the world, and acting was just one channel for a much broader engagement with ideas and crafts. He proved you could be a serious thinker and a beloved public performer, and be both without apology. Paul Newman, the blue-eyed actor who built a philanthropic business model. Paul Newman's story begins with acting and, unexpectedly, becomes a model of modern social enterprise. When he and a friend started selling homemade salad dressing to raise money for charity, it was supposed to be a small joke. Instead, it became Newman's own, a business that insisted 100% of after-tax profits go to philanthropy. What looks like generosity was also an intelligent design. Newman built a robust brand on quality, honesty, and consistent giving. He understood supply chains, product quality, and consumer psychology, and he used those skills to create sustainable giving. Newman's approach reframed celebrity influence. Instead of just lending a face to marketing, he layered quality control, rigorous business operations, and a governance structure that routed profits to charitable causes. The result was hundreds of millions of dollars for worthy organizations and a business model widely studied in ethics and management courses. Why the lie lasted and what it cost each story above shares a pattern. Hollywood's marketing machine created narratives that weren't always accidental. Publicists and studio executives often believed audiences wanted simple fantasies, a pretty face, an approachable hero, a temperamental genius you could gossip about. Intelligence complicated that fiction, so studios narrowed the frame, trimmed the nuance, and planted stories that fit a profitable mold. That rewriting wasn't harmless. For women like Hedy Lamarr and Claudette Colbert, the cost was recognition. Lamar's scientific contribution was minimized for decades. Her patent was sidelined and her public image flattened into a single dimension. For men like James Stewart and Basil Rathbone, their military and intellectual contributions were smoothed into a palatable everyman narrative or reframed as eccentricity. For artists like Brando, genius was mythologized as instability, a narrative that distracted from the craft and strategy beneath. We should also ask what we lost culturally. If bright, capable people were made invisible because they didn't fit the fantasy, then the public conversation about gender, intelligence, and power was distorted for generations. Women's technical contributions were missed. Men's intellectual labor was sometimes reframed into harmless quirks. The studio system didn't merely show us films, it shaped what kinds of people we felt comfortable admiring. A different way to see these stars, there's a quieter lesson in all this. Intelligence is not always flashy. It is strategic. It can be the thoughtful refusal to let image destroy leverage. It can be the long-term patience of an actor who buys a play to control the movie rights. It can be the refusal to let publicity become the only story told about a life. These 9 figures used brilliance in many forms. Technical invention, military leadership, contract negotiation, multilingual cultural fluency, business design, and more. Their choices were sometimes tactical, sometimes moral, sometimes survival. They understood the art of controlling what others could not see. So, next time a headline reduces a life to a single adjective, airhead, troubled, everyman, take a second look. There's almost certainly more to the story. Hollywood sold us clean, digestible myths because myths were profitable. They weren't always true. If there's any consolation, history is messy in a good way. Truth tends to leak out. Patents are recorded, films still exist, contracts surface, and historians ask different questions now than they did when studio PR departments ruled the news cycle. We can watch these performers and see them whole, not just archetypes manufactured for ticket sales, but people whose intelligence quietly changed technology, business, war, and culture. And that ending, the one where we're forced to choose between loving a face and honoring a mind, is a false choice. Admiration can be more demanding than it was taught to be. It can ask us to love complexity. It can make the strange, uncomfortable delight of realizing your favorite actor was also a pioneer, a general, a strategist, a linguist, or a business founder. That's the better story. It's bigger than glamour. It's the real one.